Thanks. It's really great to be here at Latitude and with you all in person. So we're going to be talking about hitting reset and shifting the business focus. 2020 has kind of been the poster child for hitting reset for so many people, for so many different reasons. And it's provoked some tough decisions, sometimes even some really rapid decisions. And I'm really happy that we've got some great speakers with us here for this final session today to talk just about that and for them to be able to share their experiences with us. Now, I'm a huge fan of Estonia. I come here whenever I can. I'm actually from France. We've been hit hard over the last couple of months and have had to hit reset on a couple of different things. But I come from a media background, and I've got a lot of experience with this because for the last 25 years of my career, we've constantly had to hit reset as new technologies have completely blown our business and our marketplace apart. So I think resetting sometimes has a negative connotation as well. It can be considered something to do with a failure, and that's not at all the case. One of the good things about COVID at the moment is it's starting to actually maybe even shift that mindset. So in this session, we're going to be hearing from a couple of great founders, as I said, who've got lots of experience. Let me now invite them up on stage to join us. Vicky Brock, who's the CEO and co-founder of Vistalworks. Come on up, Vicky. And Marko Lehtimäki, I beg your pardon if I pronounced that wrong, who's CEO and co-founder of AppGyver. Come on up, take a seat. Now, is there out in the audience our third guest? No, unfortunately, she's not here. So it's just an intimate conversation with the three of us. Fantastic, welcome. So Vicky, you're the CEO, co-founder of Vistalworks, based in Glasgow, but I know, like me, a huge fan of Estonia, so also based here in Tallinn.
Yes.
Fantastic, okay. Now you keep online shoppers safe from harm.
Yeah, we have essentially an online fraud detection system. It's actually used primarily by police and law enforcement, but it's targeting criminal sellers who are essentially using social media and mainstream platforms to pass off smuggled, counterfeit, illegal, or non-existent products and are just trying to steal people's card details.
Fantastic, and you're a serial entrepreneur.
I am. This is my fifth startup. Partly that's because I learn slowly. I learn over multiple businesses instead of learning within one business. But then that's been a positive thing. I couldn't have done this one as quickly and as well had I not made so many mistakes in the previous ones.
Fantastic. Now, you're not just a serial entrepreneur. You've also been given a few other titles. Inspirational Woman of the Year in 2009 by Scotland Women in Technology. Fantastic. And Scotland's Most Inspiring Business Person of 2017. Welcome. Marko, CEO, founder of AppGyver in Helsinki.
Yes.
Not quite as far away as Glasgow, but what a fantastic international panel to have here. So the world's first professional no-code platform for React and React Mobile. Also a serial entrepreneur.
Yes.
Not Scottish Women of the Year. No, okay.
Not that one.
You launched in 2013. AppGyver, is that correct?
Yeah, around 2013, 12, something around that.
Okay, so let's dive straight into our topic about resetting here. Vicky, fifth startup, I want to pull on your years of experience in here and ask you to share with you some of the things that have triggered resets. What are the catalysts for these resets and how have they changed as your companies have matured?
So has anybody ever kind of got their mum or pretended to be their mum to write a letter to get out of sports at school? Vicky can't come to sports today because of X. I found myself as CEO thinking maybe my mum can write me a letter saying that Vicky can't come to the board meeting. She can't be CEO this week. My third company was probably the biggest company I ever did. And it was both the biggest success by measures of amount of money raised, amount of trophies won, amount of press coverage and front pages, and all the fluffy stuff that we tell ourselves is success. And 5 years into that business, I realized we did not have product market fit. Product market fit, what does that mean? Well, it means you're in a good market and you're delivering a product that is satisfying your customers' desire to the extent that they will recommend it and more people buy it. 5 years in, a lot of money raised, and I realized, because I Googled it, what is product market fit, I didn't have it. And that was awful. It ultimately forced me to reset my life as well as my business, partly because I stepped back as CEO and then I got fired out of the company completely by my investors. Because it was easy for me to it was painful, but I came to terms relatively quickly with the fact that I had made a mistake. We did not have product market fit, and I needed to change direction. My shareholders and my board, understandably, when you sold this vision to us, we bought into your plan. Forgive us if we're not so quick to press reset as you are. That was an interesting experience, and that certainly took me a year to recover from before I did 4 and 5 at the same time, so they're both running. But it took me a year to recover from that, and I needed to understand. I'm an analyst. I needed to understand every mistake I made, every possible variable at every point. If I had done this thing differently and this thing differently and not said that, not done that, at what point could the outcome have been different? So I did a lot of staring and thinking and pausing before being ready to go again, having learned from that.
And was this because the product and market had moved away from each other, or was it something?
Do you know what? What I've learned and took into this latest business is I didn't do as much validation at the beginning as I thought I had. I could have done so much more on paper. I didn't need to I should never have raised money as early as I did. As soon as I raised money, the people I was getting all the input from, the people I was exposed to day after day, were coming from an investment and shareholder perspective, not a customer perspective. I did not understand enough about my customer. I did not understand enough about the market. I did not recognize that I was not in a good market. At one point, every time we got halfway through a sale, the prospect would go out of business or they would make all their staff redundant. And we would have to start a 9 to 12 month sales process again. That is not a good market. And I could have validated so much of that very cheaply, very easily. I did not need to build a product to learn those lessons. And even when I was being taught those lessons, I think many of us who are technical or who create product, even when we hear the term product market fit, we think about product. My response was, we need more features. We need a different front end. We need a different back end. We need a better algorithm. I need more techies. I need more developers. I need to work on the UI. I need more data analysts. I didn't go, what about if this is a really, really, really bad market? And actually what I need to do, when I realized we had a problem, I got my team together and we took it apart. Conceptually, we unpicked everything we had. We threw it in the middle of the table and we said, could we put this back together differently for somebody else?
Okay.
And that would have worked had I not been fired.
So catalyst that we hear, product market fit, and sort of potentially one learning point from this then is to be going back and looking at that regularly.
Yeah, or get as far as you can to prove that before you actually raise money.
Marko, I want to pick up on one of the things that Vicky just mentioned, which is when you're going ahead with a reset, you've made the decision to reset, you need to go out there and you need to talk to all of your stakeholders and communicate this to them. Vicky mentioned investors. Can you maybe talk about an example of a reset experience that you've had and how you've managed that with investors?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were in an interesting period for the last 4 years because which is in a startup's life like forever, because we had first built a product that was very successful. Then we had pivoted, and then we kind of went back into stealth mode, if you will. And as we were preparing to come out of that stealth mode, things were starting to slow down a little bit. And at some point, I realized that our original plans were way too optimistic in terms of timeline and all of that. And it was quite disappointing for everybody, not just myself, and telling the board that we'll be a year late, in a journey that's already been going on for some time. And I had to reorient the employees and everybody that let's face the reality and try to, reorient ourselves. Of course, needed to raise a little bit more money and everything to make sure that we can continue to go forward. However, so that had been there kind of as one of the resets that was mentally very hard. Then in April this year, around the time when COVID hit Europe and all of that, we finally released the product that we had been building for 4 years. And with that, we kind of faced a different type of reset where the product was received so much better than we had ever expected. I had like tens of tier 1 VCs calling me, telling that this is exactly what we've been looking for. I started to get reach outs from major companies that are thousands of times bigger than us, saying that we want to partner with you guys. We had expected that we would raise money sometime maybe next year, and anticipating kind of fairly okay launch. But that also caused a kind of positive reset, because now we had to kind of wipe out everything, all the strategy, all the plans, everything we had done, and change the mode into, first of all, okay, we are fundraising. Second, everybody needs to do the team, we cannot scale fast enough, so everybody needs to be on the forums to support people. Everybody needs to do X, Y, and Z in order to cater to the needs that are happening, because we went from 0 to tens of thousands of developers using the product in just a few weeks. And that kind of changed everything. And it was equally challenging reset, if you will, but very much more positive in nature. But in both of them, it kind of the communication is really the key. Of course, as a CEO, your job is also always to keep the vision and make sure that everybody understands where we're marching and what's the pace and what are we planning to do. But it's kind of a change management that you need to do in those times. And if there's too many resets happening, too frequently, obviously it can cost even trust issues or something like that. But when there are good reasons and you explain to people, it's like in my experience, all of these resets, which we've had like 100, have gone quite smoothly. But I've always put a lot of effort into communication and making sure to have one-on-ones also, in addition to, of course, boards and investors and all.
So I'm sort of hearing then that the things that you constantly have to keep with your investors and your key stakeholders, that trust and the communication at reset times, it's about dialing all of that and maybe even going in, sort of closer with these one-on-one conversations,
yes,
as you say. Now then, we've got a question here and said there's a line between let's ditch and reset and okay, let's try and make it work. And I think the thing, reset is one word, and it's sort of usually thought about like you press a button and you reset. But there's all different kinds of sort of things on the scale of reset. So this question is like, okay, do we press the button and reset, or do we go on and try and make a go of it? Sort of based on your experiences, how do you manage or think about that decision? About, okay, are we going to go reset here, or are we going to go and try and push? And then how far do you push before you go back to that reset decision?
It depends, from my perspective, it depends at what stage your business is. If you are an early stage startup and you haven't raised money, it is a lot easier to reset. It's a lot easier to pivot. And you may, if you've read The Lean Entrepreneur or anything like that, it kind of talks about this whole thing of this iterative process. And that's okay at the beginning, because a startup does exist to validate whether it deserves to exist. It exists to figure out if there's a market, if there's a business model. Later, when you have supposedly validated those things and you have raised money, which means you have a board of directors, you're no longer, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO and you own more than anybody else, it's still not your decision anymore, at least not yours on your own. And then reset is dramatic. And for me, would still be the absolute last resort. I would much prefer, and this kind of comes into the other question that we've seen there, I would much prefer to find ways to iterate, reposition, expand this, all of these slightly less terrifying things. Because I can tell you what, I sat in a board meeting and said the word pivot, and somebody came across the table to try and strangle me. And it was only because they were really, really short and they had little arms and they couldn't reach that I'm sitting here.
Okay, so we're hearing then sort of like the maturity of the company, whether you've raised or not, can be a factor to help you in this. Okay, do we reset or do we not? But what about the sort of the context and the condition that we see at the moment, with where everything is changing so fast? And I'm sorry, we have to mention the C word here, COVID. So it's, we're not sure what tomorrow is going to look or feel like. So never, there's the factor of the maturity of the organization, but the situation isn't even mature. Tomorrow we might all be starting with something completely new again. So sort of, have you been in something like that, a scenario or situation that you could share some experience, Marko?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually recently just wrote a piece on that about business continuity plans versus general agility of organizations, and kind of the world, everything is accelerating, right? And in a way, these resets that I, for example, mentioned, they wouldn't have been resets for a startup that's half a year old. But for a company that's marching towards a certain very specific point, those feel as, I mean, to me, the extra 1 year and everybody oriented around that was much harder reset and pivot than the pivot we did 180 degrees 6 years ago, going from consumer product changing to enterprise product and killing everything. It felt more kind of bigger. And why I say that is that as the world keeps changing and the change is accelerating, organizations must, you must constantly, it's not even quarterly, but kind of daily, check where you're at and are those observations valid that you made half a year ago. And it's quite easy for startups, but I don't envy the public company leaders, for example, today. It's very hard when so many things are changing and interconnected and kind of global in nature.
Certainly, I mean, in a previous life as such, I was working for one of those very large organizations, and you could say it's easier for startups, but we actually had the resources to be able to dedicate time and money and effort to business continuity and disaster recovery planning. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things that as a startup, you're constantly trying to find enough resources to just do the sweat the big stuff as such. And these kind of things fall back to the you just get lost with a long list of other things to do one day. But sort of disaster recovery planning doesn't need to be a huge thing. It's just like, okay, if tomorrow we don't have access to this, how are we going to continue to work? If tomorrow this suddenly thing just disappears, one key partner, for example, Vicky, you mentioned partners maybe not being there one day, then how do you do that? So I think when you're thinking about your organization as well, your business model canvas, maybe just try removing bricks from time to time and see how your business would actually continue working. Okay. Now, this morning, the President, Madam President, said that COVID has accentuated trends. I think don't need to explain that. We can all see it. One of the things that it's accelerated is e-commerce globally. And as a result, COVID, although globally it's seen as not being a good thing, some organizations have benefited from this acceleration that we see in certain sectors. Vicky, Vistalworks is focused on e-commerce. Has COVID forced you to kind of positively reset?
It has, in a surprising way. I mean, I reacted the way probably most businesses did as soon as we realized COVID was going to be a thing, like a major thing. We reacted the way many businesses do, which is, quick, cut all costs. Like, stop spending money, stop hiring, stop spending, make sure that we can survive for a year without any sales. And actually, of course, what turned out to happen was crime moved online. Very, very quickly, our clients are police, tax authorities, law enforcement. Very, very quickly, there was nobody on the streets and in the shop, so crime just moved everywhere online. And so we found ourselves in a position similar to you. I was getting, and I fortunately still continue to do, getting inbound inquiries from major organizations from all over the world saying, could you do this for our industry in this language? Yeah, we're interested in Polish, Romanian, and Ukrainian. We're interested in, Chinese, vastly complex business problems to solve as a startup. How do I localize? Which languages do I localize? How do I localize my AI? I mean, we're a data tech business. This is not just about translating the front end. This is about fundamentally localizing in currency and language everything that you do. So it's been hugely exciting. I'm still very financially conservative, so I haven't rushed to go build it and we'll worry about paying for it later. I'm still very good. Let's worry about how this makes business model sense, unit economic sense, how we're going to pay for this, and then which ones we do in the right order. But yeah, it has been certainly a more of a positive experience than I feared it would be in February when I was very, very sick.
Okay, I'm not going to hit reset on this panel right now, but I'm going to pivot and ask our third guest to join us because she's now arrived. Therese Köhler, welcome. Come up on stage, please. Woo, great to have you here with us. Welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
All the way from Berlin.
Yes.
Completing our international panel. You're the CEO and founder of heycater, which is Europe's leading corporate catering company.
Yes.
Fantastic. Do you want to tell us just very quickly, I'll let you introduce yourself, and very quickly, a little bit about heycater?
Yes, of course. So I founded the company 5 years ago with the goal to digitalize the B2B catering industry. It's a super, super old industry that hardly ever saw major disruption. So the largest catering firms, which actually make up, for example, Compass Group, for example, makes up 53 billion in revenues per year and has more than 500,000 employees, actually. They've all been founded in the 50s and 60s, and ever since, this industry really hasn't seen any major innovation. So when I started the firm 5 years ago, I really wanted to bring up all the nice and small local food providers up to a platform where businesses, office managers, culture managers can book nice food in a convenient way online.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think everyone's clear about what heycater does, and we were just talking about, sort of how do you actually think about pivot or resetting in a context that's constantly changing, like we have at the moment. So do you want to give us what you've been doing with heycater over the course of maybe the last 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Maybe I begin with a little opening question. How many of you have ever done 100 burpees? Raise your hand. Nice. I see a few hands. How many of you ever wanted to get access to a really famous club and you actually made it? Yeah, I also see a couple of faces here in Berlin. We have Berghain, a super big popular club that you hardly ever get access to, but once you make it, I can assure you it's super exciting, and you get this thrill of energy. And this kind of feeling actually happened to me when COVID hit us. Of course, it was a mixture of feelings that also included fear, but mostly I was really thrilled and excited because for us, working in an industry that is severely hit by the situation, it's a major opportunity now to really drive change in the long term. And I think for us as a team, we also now, in hindsight, maybe starting from a cultural point of view, if you're working in an industry that is sort of profiting from this situation, you can scale faster because your business is online anyway. You can, I don't know, for example, online banking. Those industries, a lot of industries have profited extremely. The catering industry has been severely hit, and I'm talking about, for example, Vodafone having more than 10,000 employees in Germany. All of those employee canteens are closed at the moment, probably until including September, probably also longer. If you look at, for example, Salesforce, Microsoft, all those big tech firms, no people at the office means also no one eating at the office, which is basically the existence of my company as well. On the other hand, the situation really cries for solutions. And in our firm, we said, okay, if there's someone in this market who is the most fit, the most energetic, the most innovative, the most customer-centric, then it's probably us. So let's roll up our sleeves and really make change happen now. So this is what we did. So of course, we also had to look at our cost. So we tried to save wherever we can, and we actually kind of even crowdsourced this saving mindset to the team and are now tracking on a monthly basis how much money we spend and how much we perform below our planned burn, which is super nice. We on the technology side, we really immensely focused on making things scalable. So we actually worked on 2 new major products. We launched an app, which we didn't do in 5 years, but we actually realized that this use case is going to be used more and more in the future, that especially now that you need individually boxed food. For us, COVID actually really facilitated us developing the products that our customers need. Ordering catering online, paying contactless, pre-ordering for pickup, all those kind of things are things that we implemented actually thanks to COVID much faster than probably without. And the third thing, and this is from a non-profit perspective, I think you want to feel safe when eating at work. And I like to eat together with my colleagues. So I like feeling safe and being together is kind of conflicted at the moment. So it's even more now, more than ever, our task at heycater to develop the solutions that instill trust and make people at work feel safe again. So this is what we're trying to achieve now.
So this is really interesting. So what we're actually hearing is from all the mayhem and the chaos and the unknowns, we've got the current context, we've got sort of 2 different things happening. We've got those that are bringing economic or let's say commercial benefits. And so it's like Vicky, you've given us an example of that. And then we've got organizations that the entire sort of scope in which they're operating and if their business model doesn't exist anymore, or it doesn't have the same values and needs to be rejigged. One of the things I know from my experiences is that actually when there's complete chaos and mayhem, crap is hitting the fan, that's sometimes the best opportunity to actually do radical things. Because nothing is normal anymore. There's no reasonable anymore. And so if you've been thinking about not necessarily hitting reset, but even maybe doing something different, this could be a really great time to go out and do that. So we've talked about some of the contexts and some of your experiences. In his book, Blink, but actually just one question out, so to the audience out there and guys watching remotely as well. So how many of you have had your businesses positively impacted by COVID? How many of you are actually seeing this sort of thing that, yeah, there's a couple of hands going up in the audience as well. It's not been bad news for everyone from a business standpoint. So Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. I'm a big fan of what he writes. He said in this book, great decision makers aren't those who process the most information or spend the most time deliberating, but those that have perfected the art of filtering out of the few facts that matter from the overwhelming variables. So data drives everything today, okay? It's the oil out there. How much do you use data in your decision to reset? Like a little bit reset, just rejig, or to totally reset? Is it something that you're using? Or are you using your gut feeling? How much of it is data? How much of it is business? And how much of it is, what inside your heart, your soul, your brain is telling you?
I'd be an analyst to say it depends. The big existential, so there's a couple of questions that have come in around this on the no product market fit issue. That was then, I would say, all gut. What we did next in that situation, which I really do think of as like a major existential situation, is almost like my data is too old to be relevant. The contexts from before are not going to help me where we need to go. The very first thing I did in that situation was like, how can we extend our window of decision making? How can I cut my costs that mean we survive for longer, meaning that we as a team have got more time to solve the problem? And whether you're talking reset, whether you're talking no product market fit, being able to slow the decision-making process enough to make a proper decision. Now, it could be that the decision that you made in the first nanosecond in your gut is the right decision, and I know that's what he talks about in that book. But being able to extend, slow, and control the period in which you calmly make the decision, for me, is the key, and that's how you make a good decision. Even though I'm an analyst who loves data, I do not go running off to data in that scenario. What I go back to is, what do I know? Like, what do I know about what we do? What do we know about who we are and what we believe and why we exist and why we're doing this? And that's all, not just gut, but that's learned instinct. And that's like this rich knowledge set that you can actually tap in when you have to do that. Do I do that in a daily stand-up? No, I do not. Do I do that in a financial meeting? No, I do not. But when my survival is on the line as a business, that's the mode I go into.
Okay. Marko, same question.
I may be more of I'm an Excel person, kind of. I model everything. I model the whole world. But of course it's triggered by a gut feeling. But I always try to model, let's say I become convinced that something needs to be done. I will try to model it in 5 different ways and try to quantify. Of course, sometimes data is not available, and sometimes I do not like to stretch data to say things it doesn't. So sometimes it's difficult because as a startup, you don't necessarily have all the resources to have the correct data. But if you do, I try to model it in a million ways and then see if that resonates with the gut feeling and with the kind of other observations. And but then while communicating to maybe the board or the team members or others, I rarely bring in the data to those meetings for this kind of a reset situation, because let's put it this way, that it is, to me, it's mainly to help reconfirm the conviction that was there already in the first place, or reject it.
Okay, so you're looking at all the possible scenarios out there. You're landscaping those out. Okay. Therese.
Yeah, sure, thanks. I think it's a good question. I think I'm more on a Marko side when I think about dashboards and modeling our future development. But when shit hits the fan, there's a lot of nice dashboards that you can throw into the trash, basically, because every time you look at it, you want to start to cry. Actually, that's how it was for us. Like 4 weeks in a row, double-digit negative growth in GMV. Our AOVs really also went downhill. Closing rate went downhill. And I think what I learned is that you, in a situation of a severe crisis where things are so unexpected, like with COVID, it's like when you come into a sandstorm, it won't help you to try to look long distance. You have to look short distance. And that's why short distance, you have to be extremely agile in being able to adapt to changes in the data that kind of gives you an indication if you're doing the right thing to survive. And I think this is what we were trying to do. And then we also, at the same time, based on our experience, tried to make short-term bets, and then tried to validate those short-term bets very quickly with quantitative and qualitative data, and then learn and also be ruthless in adjusting when things don't work as planned, or when you actually have to admit to yourself that you're working on something that maybe helps you for the short term, but it's not going to fit in your long-term strategy. For us, that was the case when we were trying to build a delivery service to cater to people working from home. I mean, it's the most straightforward thing you would do. If the office is the home office, then you bring the food to the home office. But then we also quickly realized that we are tapping into a market where we will hit boundaries, such as not reaching the critical mass, not having the logistics in place, and actually not even having the suppliers that caters to this use case, and that we had to pivot in a ruthless base. Also, because we made a short-term bet, we said, okay, it's going to bring us this amount of money in this amount of time and have great customer feedback. And if not, we just cut it. So we cut it actually from one day to another and took the next bet and short-term growth experiment and did the same thing over again up to a point where it actually worked. And we built something that we now keep on a long term. So it's absolutely a mix of both and perspective.
So actually I want to pick up and continue with this notion of speed as such and tip towards one of the questions that we've got here. So based on your experiences, what's the sort of the most efficient or the most impactful thing that you've done rapidly when you've made a decision to reset? The first thing maybe, or would you'd counsel and share with the audience here to sort of say, okay, once you've made the decision to reset, what's the most impactful and the most efficient thing that one can possibly do?
I suppose the very first thing to do is obviously you're your assumptions no longer hold true. So your spending patterns to that point no longer hold true. So the very first thing is that you can't keep spending on sales and marketing in the way that you were, with the messages that you were, in the channels you were. You have to stop that. So stopping a lot of things is actually the most efficient thing that you can do. But then for me, it's a little bit, as you mentioned, Therese, it's breaking it down to the smallest problem that you can solve and prove that had a positive impact. Because you don't want to repeat your mistakes of like running very, very, very far down another path just randomly. So how then do you find the smallest little pieces of things that give you validation that, okay, this step is a good step? And I suppose that's what I've done, is like we literally broken product conceptually apart and broken markets conceptually apart and buying units conceptually apart and gone, what's the smallest thing we can do for somebody that they will pay for? That if they pay for it, that is a good sign, and we should get another person to pay for it.
So, Marko, we've learned now that you model everything out. Is that one of the things that you found to be one of the most efficient, impactful things, or is there something else you'd like to share?
You mean impactful in terms of executing that reset plan, or?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that, and a lot of communication. I immediately go to my management team, and I would discuss with them, ask them to also create their own kind of whether supporting or not supporting, presentation or come up with something and sleep over it and then have a lot of discussion. Allow people to have time to whether agree or not agree, and have a lot of dialogue. I think that's really the key, because sometimes if you are moving too much in an isolation, because in those kind of situations you may not consider all the options. So I think getting everybody on board as soon as you can, but not sooner, so that you don't confuse people, but as soon as you can, I think that's really the key. So I would say model and chat and discuss and have dialogues, argue, yeah.
Modeling, arguing, dialogue.
In a good way, yeah.
Therese, we've got 54 seconds left on the clock. Very quickly, what's
Very
the most
quickly.
fast impact speed?
I think for us, it was probably communication. We over-communicated wherever we could and tried to take the team along every decision we are making and trying to make everyone feel part of it. And we did that with our board just as well as our team, and had full transparency, which made a lot of things easier.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much to the three of you for coming in. Thank you to the audience here and remotely for your questions also. Those of you here, grab the speakers when they get off stage if you want to continue the conversations with them. Thank you very much also to the Latitude team for having us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.